You? Yes. Yes, you mean mandatory treat? Yeah. Just wrap this one up. I thought we should ask a couple of questions arising out of that. Thank you. There was nothing that should concern you that came out of the committee only time. But I would say there was some concern. The interim audit is scheduled for May, and that's when they'll do their systems review. I suppose that begs the question, from your perspective, did the transfer of balances go well?
Yes, would be the simple answer. So I am unaware of any issues in terms of that transfer. There were detailed reconciliations that were done in terms of being able to go live with the confidence of those opening balances.
Oh, that's good. I think we should note that though.
But it's a very good point in terms of obviously the pressure that everybody is going to be under around that time in terms of both the Audit New Zealand team with obviously LTPs as well as council staff with LTPs, and in the lead up to what will be our first year-end process through new systems and processes as well. So that's a really good call out that we can work together through.
And there was a question about the GST refunds. Are they part of that tax pooling arrangement?
Yes, so that's my understanding, is that it has come about because of the tax pooling arrangements. So staff have reverted back to PwC, who are our tax advisors, to work on the resolution of that.
So does council earn interest on those monies? Because some other taxpayer is gaining a benefit from that at the moment, presumably.
Yeah, through you, Mr. I don't have an answer to that. Can certainly follow that up.
Could you come back to us on that one? I think that covers all that. Are you going or are you staying?
We'll be going if that's all right, Woody. Thank you.
Right. We'll just pass this resolution to receive this report. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Chris. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. And we look forward to you being back next year.
Thanks, guys.
Same to you. Item 10.
So we've got Julie Beaufort online, who I think is going to lead us through this topic. You there, Julie?
Julie, are you going to present this or speak to this paper?
Might be having some camera issues, maybe. Emily's there. Morena, Emily.
Morena. Sorry, having some tech issues from Pidal today.
Cool. And so Julie's obviously just dropped out of the meeting. So are you going to take us through these shovel-ready audits? Yep.
Julie was going to, but if she's not,
Oh.
if she's not back, I'm happy to. Give her half a minute. I'm happy to start, Mr. Chairman, if
Yeah.
you'd like me to, and if Julie pops back in.
I think that
Yep.
would be a good idea.
Great, thank you. Kia ora koutou, good morning. Oh, can you still hear me? You've frozen.
Yes.
Oh,
We can
great.
hear, we can hear you, Em. Your video's
Great.
frozen here too.
Yeah, I'm
but
going to
it's
just
fine.
turn camera off because I think there's something up with the connection. So I'll just drop off like that. Thank you for the opportunity to bring this to Risk and Assurance Committee. So this is our third audit for these projects. So for the Piako Green Corridor and Upper Waiumu projects, as part of our funding deed requirement, we are required to carry out an annual audit. That is a standard for MFE where the funding exceeds $1 million. They're the only two shovel-ready projects where we have to carry this out. So we're starting to get into a bit of a rhythm of doing this and know what to expect. The level of audit and assurance is quite high, and as such, we were a bit limited with who could carry out the audits for us. So you'll see in the report there that both projects were compliant in terms of our funding arrangements. And there was just the one note in the supplementary information with the auditors a bit confused about how we apply a day rate when we engage a contractor for machine work and versus our need to capture people hours for our reporting requirements to the ministry so we can do our FTE employment calculations as part of our funding agreement. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Yeah, well, I read them as clean reports. Okay, no questions. So we have a mover and seconder to receive these reports, please. Thank you, Pamela. Seconder. Thank you, Warren. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, and see you same time next year for another round of audits. Have a great day.
Thank you. Which brings us to item 11.
So just got the resolutions, I think. Oh, no.
No, they're
Okay.
done.
Oh, don't.
On page
Back up.
113.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think Sean Hodson was hopefully joining the meeting. He's not there at the moment. Sorry, team, is anyone following up with Sean in terms of his attendance? If the committee wants to carry on, I'm
Okay.
happy to try to answer any questions that may arise from this. I think this review was undertaken largely in conjunction with this committee and acknowledging some of the challenges that we experienced through the revaluation. Hopefully that's Sean popping in right now. No. No, I think that was David Sutton. So no, Sean. So there's information that's provided here in terms of some of the challenges that we had through the process, as well as the lessons learned and some areas for improvement that will be picked up in terms of future processes. A couple of key ones in terms of the learnings is around the importance of us having our own reference point in terms of that market data and unit rates that we can actually rely on, rather than the advice coming through from valuers. That was one of the key issues that we faced, of the unit rate that the valuers were recommending versus our own contract experience. And so if we've got a process internally to be tracking that, then that puts us on a much stronger footing in terms of that information and understanding what a reasonable movement in asset values may be.
So do you share that information with the valuers?
Yes, it is shared with them. And I think there was a lot of work that was done by the team to actually check and challenge around those rates. As some members of the committee will be aware, I think we started off at a unit rate of something like $220 per cubic metre, ended up down at sort of 44 type level. So it's substantial and this is all around our stock bank valuation. So the team do have a register of all of those contracts. They are able to calculate those unit rates. I think this experience through this revaluation process has just reinforced the criticality of keeping that information up to date so that we actually have that there. That's probably connected with some of the considerations or recommendations in terms of is contracting this work out actually the right thing to continue doing, given the challenges that we've had with various professional services firms that we've engaged in this space, or do we try and hold some of that expertise internally, which would put us in the position of being able to consider more frequent revaluations or cyclical revaluations. It's noted here a lot of councils are moving from the 3-yearly cycle to every other year, and probably particularly at the moment working within quite dynamic markets and pricing environments to be able to pick up that price sensitivity on a more frequent basis, which means that we're not getting the deep spikes or humps and hollows in terms of the impact. I think the rest of it is probably around some of the quality control and review processes from on the valuer side, version control of reporting, review processes and the like. And here's Sean just in the nick of time to answer all the questions. So yes, I think this has been a really valuable process to go through. It has involved staff across the asset management team, finance, and there was a conversation with Clarence from an Audit New Zealand perspective as well.
Thank you. Questions? Chris?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a couple of questions. The first one, I guess, is to be directed at Janine. It really is, do our new Infor systems allow maintenance of accurate cost data on a project-by-project basis? Because I raised that question because of the information that was presented to me from last time appeared that there's little reconciliation being done on the data between the financial systems and the cost data, which was in a spreadsheet, which I assume by the structure of the spreadsheet was being done by the engineers in the integrated catchment. So that's my first question, because if that data is captured regularly and is being verified, then I would expect that the evaluation process would be far more seamless. And the second one you mentioned about having doing the revaluations internally. Does the standard allow for that? Because my recollection standards generally have to have an independent expert verifying the quantum of the revaluation. So if we're going to be bringing that in-house, will that satisfy the reporting standard?
So through you, Mr. Chair, if I can answer the first question first. One of the key Cases for change in terms of our move to the Infor solution was around integrated financial information, so particularly in relation to asset management. And so what we now have in place is the financial transactions being initiated within the asset management end of the system, and that is fully integrated through into the financial management system. So that is achieved within the solution. I think previously we've had the financial information has been captured in the financial system and then needed to be effectively lifted and put into the asset management system. The asset management system wasn't the place that we were maintaining those financial records. And then we've had to do reconciliations and analysis between them to make sure that they're actually the same. So that is a challenge that will be addressed. I'm not saying it's there now or it's perfect now, but that was one of the key cases for actually moving to the type of solution that we have implemented now. In terms of the internal capacity or staff doing the revaluations, I'm not aware that that would be an issue for us. There are a number of councils that actually do their own valuations internally anyway. And Sean can probably speak to that with his experience in a number of other organisations. I think the assurance that we can take over that is through potentially an external peer review process rather than actually doing the groundwork themselves of the valuation. But maybe I'll hand to Sean for his knowledge and experience in that space.
Yeah, quite right, Janine. There are a number of councils who do their own internal valuations and then they get them externally peer reviewed. That's deemed as being acceptable. There are some complications around that in terms of having the right staff to do it and the time to do it as well.
What you're saying is that there will be an external peer review of the internal work.
Yeah, that'll be an audit requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Chris, I think it's a good move in maturity if we can build our own valuation models with support as required and actually be able to run them. Whether we hire an external value to tick off the actual valuation is something for you to decide. Certainly a peer review, but you could still get an external valuation, except you provide them the entire models which you've agreed in advance, are structured and worked correctly. Other infrastructure companies I'm involved with, and this is not Auckland, this is in a different sector, constantly maintain their own valuation models and they work with the experts and they actually don't necessarily hire the experts. They hire people who can run the model, but they get the experts to design it. And then beforehand you can have, so that reduces the cost because they don't have to sort of grab your data and run this thing, which is just a farce. You shouldn't have to do that. And secondly, you can have, because you've got a model, you can actually pull out the key drivers and have an intelligent conversation well ahead of the valuation date and start talking about these things. So it's actually a good sign of maturity of asset management if you've got this tool. The only thing is there's a lot of data crunching to make it happen and you've got to be ready for that. I don't know whether you're ready for that, but I think it's a great idea actually, and it really will move you forward in terms of having these discussions. And certainly if you wanted to go to, and again, you could have a review, you could have a peer review, but have an actual valuation every now and again. Yeah. You could change your policy, but still make them use your model, which they'll screen. But if you've designed it with them, then maybe that's okay. So yeah, I think it's a good idea. It's just there's a lot of data crunching, and you've got to be ready to do that as well. So another story altogether, and that's coming out of what we've got, I would imagine.
But I think the quality of what is produced is far better. Chris.
Look, Paul, I understand totally, and I fully support what's being done. The key is to make sure that the information which is in the financial systems is the same as what's in the asset management system. That if those two are aligned, then absolutely you save so much time and effort, and particularly external consultants' times. I hate to think what last year's exercise cost us in terms of just Becker's fees alone. There's a lot of work went into that. It just by looking at their report, you could see the effort that had gone into it. And they were working with, put it kindly, impure data that hadn't been at that time reconciled back to the financial systems. So that is the key.
Robbie, do you have a question?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, my question was similar. It was that we got a number of staff now that are, especially in integrated catchment, that look to be going to become consultants for us instead of staff members. So we're going to lose a lot of IP in that area as well. So I think, as you said, it has to be quite detailed how you're going to make that plan work, because IP is a big part of that, of those staff that's been here for many, many years and now may leave. They leave with that IP as well. So, and that's going to be an integral part of making that whole process work correctly. So yeah, I just, and there's a couple of good field staff too that hold that IP as well. It's not just engineers and stuff. So yeah, there's a bigger, I think you got to have look a bit outside the circle for that information as well.
Right. If there are no more questions, do we have a mover and seconder to receive the report, please? Thank you, Warren. Thank you, Chris. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. We move now on to item 12, internal audit activity. Page 116.
Maria.
Good morning.
Morning,
good
how are
morning.
Janine.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess just to introduce the report, what we have for the committee today is based off the assurance mapping exercise that KPMG have undertaken following, I guess, the strategic direction review of our risk statements and risk appetites, looking at where potential gaps or opportunities exist across our risk framework, and have recommended a proposed 3-year internal audit schedule. So that's the first item that's reported. And then also presenting for you the business continuity and emergency response review recommendations and management comments today. But we've got the KPMG team online, so probably just hand over to them to talk to those items.
Thank you, Janine. David.
Right, thank you. Yeah, so look, I think in terms of the plan, it's been good to work through that alongside. I mean, there's been quite a lot of risk work this year, thinking about the critical risks, risk appetite. So this was the final piece. You know, we have strategic direction of council. What are the risks to that direction? And then, you know, what assurance are you getting as councillors on those risks? So going through, we've had further discussions around the 3 lines of defence. That's a controls model, which is effectively saying, look, management are responsible for the risks. They are first line. Second line is oversight committees. There's still or areas such as finance or compliance, health and safety if they're centralised. And then finally, third line, which is internal audit and other assurance providers. So we try to pull together a most effective plan that maps back to those critical risks. And that ensures that you're getting the biggest bang for buck in terms of your budget. You know, we are focusing on the things that matter the most. What I would say around the plan is there is a little bit of contention in there. There generally is, internal audit is a finite resource. It has to cover off, a whole range of different areas, very diverse areas. When we did the mapping, there was, more to do than we could fit within the budget of council. So we've effectively looked to schedule about 3 reviews per year, looking at the next 3 years. That fits within current budget, but there were other reviews which we still felt were important, which have been kind of put into a holding pattern effectively. And my view on that is, things change, priorities change. We may not be able to review certain areas in a given year. If that's the case, we could look to draw off that holding net. But the other question for the councillors is, are you comfortable with that position? If there are areas in that holding pattern we could reprioritise, or we could increase the size of the plan. But of course, that will have a budget impact for internal audit. So that's something that impacts the long-term plan. So it is an important decision to be reached. But yes, I guess the key aspects for you as councillors: are you comfortable with the prioritisation? Is there anything missing that you're concerned about? And are you comfortable with the prioritisation, particularly across the 3-year schedule? Perhaps health and safety sits versus other priorities. So I'll perhaps pause there and just take any questions or comments on the plan.
Questions? None?
Yeah, what's the process to get here? I understand there's the risk register and the risk appetite statements. I understand we've got the risk, but I mean, is this an ELT driven thing? Is it a U driven thing? Did you talk to councillors? Did you talk to the chairperson, or I mean, how do you get there in terms of priorities?
Yeah, it's we haven't had any discussions with councillors. This is the discussion pool. The discussion has been interviews and understanding the 3 lines of defence with management, and then coming up with the straw man in terms of the proposed plan going forward. So no discussion with mayor or governance at this layer. And I suppose we're interested in your perspective. I guess mapping it back to the key risks which you've been involved with, that's how we've prioritised the focus. So there should be a line up with your priorities, but be interested in your views on that.
Our CEO and ELT, are you like the prioritisation, or is this something that hasn't got to you yet, or is this the first look?
I'm not sure, Janine. Is it being passed us at ELT?
No, it hasn't been through ELT. I guess each of the risk owners were identified in terms of doing that assurance mapping. So risk owners have been involved through that process of understanding where we're currently at in relation to each of those areas. But I do see this as a governance activity. Yeah.
I'm encouraged that you've used assurance mapping as the basis for the plan.
Yeah.
So there's at least some logic to it. And rather than just it's their turn.
Yeah, that's right. And that's that is probably an old school approach to internal audit. We cycle through different areas. This has got to be about prioritisation. And when I look through the plan and the topics, there are some big areas in there. There's capability and culture. We've done nothing in the people space over the past 7 or 8 years that we've been involved with Waikato Regional Council. Health and safety, which of course is a key area. You're not personally liable as councillors under the Act, but it is still a very, very critical area to be covering off. Stakeholders, not only broader stakeholder reviews, but also co-governance and treaty, which speaks to cultural competency. These are complex areas. It is, and I do want to also reinforce the fact whenever we're doing these types of reviews, such as stakeholder reviews or co-governance, we are using specialists in those areas. We're not. I know you might think of us as an accountancy firm. We are not an accountancy firm any longer. We are very much a consultancy organisation. So we have people with deep expertise in these areas to make sure that we're adding value. But it is always hard to get the balance right. There's an awful lot of things that we could look at, but it's what is the most important from a governance point of view, where you are effectively accountable as councillors for those risks. We're here to give you assurance that they are being managed appropriately by management within risk appetite.
I've got a question. Dave, given the coalition agreements and the changes in priorities, which have been demonstrated in those agreements by the new government, from a governance point of view, the first 2 items on your additional internal audit topics are more important to me from a risk perspective than the co-governance and treaty settlement process. I think that's going to be de-escalated to a less important level under the regime going forward. So I would ask that you, my perspective, that be considered, one of those topics be elevated and the co-governance item be de-escalated. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I guess that we're still seeing that playing out. But it is looking as if that's going to be the case. Certainly, we're only asking for the first year of the plan to be fully approved, and where priorities change, we can absolutely look to change out topics as need be. So that probably is one that will be de-escalated, as you suggest.
So I think Chris maybe.
Chris. Just through Mr. Chair. My read of the coalition agreements is that they're going to honour all the treaty settlement provisions from the past, in which we have quite a construct within our council. So, David, I don't know if you or your team have actually looked and have a view on what that might mean in terms of the prioritisation, but it's I'm not sure I've seen anything that's going to make it lesser of importance in our council. Whether we get new and additional ones might be something that would be considered.
And it's a good point. Yeah, and look, just reflecting on what I just said, I think also Māori are a really key stakeholder of council, regardless of central government focus. So, and that is to support the strategy in terms of what you want to do in the region, which therefore, regardless of where central government may go, it's really as to what importance does it have to the regional council strategy. So I think it's too early to be sure on that point. I think it's something that we would that is scheduled for FY25-26, that review. We would be bringing this plan back next year. It rolls every 3 years effectively. So I think it's too soon to deprioritise this at this viewpoint, given there's so much change.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and I guess in light of that change, it might be once that legislation has settled, actually understand a way of understanding what the impacts and implications of that change may be as well on our current operating model potentially.
So wouldn't a
Is there
practical
anything?
solution be that the committee receives your recommendation, approves year one,
Yes.
and diaries to revisit this once we know what the replacement legislation or rules are going to be once the bonfire of the regulations has happened? I think, I hear what Chris is saying, and I think that's about the only thing we can do that wouldn't result in any potentially low value time being spent. Is the committee happy with that? So we have the power to actually approve this plan, don't we? So
if we change the recommendation to approve the internal audit schedule for 24-25 rather than the 3-year.
And in actual fact, that's typically the approach. So you approve the next 12 months and take the outer years as indicative, and it gives you a sense more where the broader plan is going to focus its time rather than setting that in stone for the year 2 and year 3. So I think that's a good result.
Again, councillors, is this what keeps you awake at night? I mean, this is being asked for our tool. So this is 13 items in order. Is this the order you'd put them in terms of what makes you sort of worried, or would you reorder them on that basis?
It's only one of them.
I think that just reflecting on what David was saying, that I think that this is a good indication of a trajectory of travel that reflects some of the conversations that councillors have had. We haven't specifically set aside time as a council to go through this item by item and make sure that there's collective alignment on that. I think that by approving that first year and saying, let's get through that and then have a relook at years 2 and 3 and make sure that they're still highlighting the areas we'd like a greater degree of focus. I think that that's an appropriate approach.
Thank you. Right. If there's no more, oh, sorry.
Sorry, were there any questions from members around the business continuity emergency management review being provided as well?
I thought
Actually,
we'd be
can I speak to
moving to
that?
that, Janine. Yeah, do you want me to provide a sort of an overarching summary around it?
Yes,
That'd be great.
please.
Right. Yeah, so look, I think having done basically risk appetite work with every council in the Waikato, except for a very small number, and more broadly, it would be fair to say that all councils have reflected on Cyclone Gabrielle and other events, but primarily the cyclone in terms of their adequacy of response to these types of events, and putting more emphasis on to preparation and getting ready for when these occur, and certainly to suspend focus on non-critical activities when these events happen, to make sure that the community feel comfortable that councils are adequately responding when these things occur. So I think the review is timely. This is the review's been focused on the adequacy of council's business continuity and preparedness for major events. And I think there's been some good observations in the report, some key strengths around strong expertise and experience, and very experienced people in this space, which is great, and some good documentation also around business continuity that we would expect. But with all these things, of course, there's always room for improvement. So there were really 4 key areas that we'd call out. The first is there is exercises held at a team level, but we think there would be value in doing more enterprise-wide or organisational-wide type scenario planning and exercises, just to keep that recency and familiarity with business continuity and emergency response. That was the first area. The second area is around business impact analysis, and that's a bit of a technical term, but effectively it is trying to work out, what are the potential impacts on council and what do we need to try and mitigate? Are we happy to have systems out for 3 months, or do we need to have a system back within 24 hours? There's quite a difference, therefore, in terms of being prepared for if the system goes down, we need to have redundancy, or we can live without it for a period of time. Now, that is a common area of weakness for all organisations around business continuity. We did see there needed to be some broader views of the types of impacts that are considered within that business impact analysis. And a very common finding for other organisations as well is there seemed to be a lack of agreement between IT and the organisation on minimal acceptable outages. So, do we agree the business, is using a system that might be saying it needs to be restored within an hour, and getting consistency with IT, who obviously have a key role to support that. So more work to get consistency and to keep making sure that those business impact analyses aren't overly administrative and red tape, but still good discussions to be had to make sure that they do consider the types of impacts and what we're going to do about it, and also the dependencies between functions. And that takes things to a little bit more complexity, but where we've got teams that are working together, are we thinking about the broader dependencies across the council within our preparedness and business continuity response? The third area was around training of staff, and there's good training for the people directly involved, but it was particularly around alternates. So we were looking to have a broader focus on team members to make sure that we are investing in training of those alternates, because who knows what's going to happen. We probably, we may be often needing to lean on those people. They need to know what they're going to be doing. And there was a little bit of also awareness of CDM, the emergency civil defence team knowing who these people are, so that if something were to occur, they would be able to obviously communicate with them. The final area was really just around documentation and consistencies, and some tidy up in that space. So there are some other lower rated findings, but those were the general recommendations, and management have picked up those recommendations and will be moving them forward.
So David, what's your overall assessment of WRC's maturity or ability to respond in a situation?
I don't want to minimise the findings. I think the recommendations are good, but I've seen far worse. So I think the fact that you've got good capability in people is first and foremost the thing that is important, but there needs to be a little bit of brushing up. So I think it was a good result, Graham.
Okay. I heard some feedback on the result of Gabriel in Hastings district, and they said they found them still, their plans didn't really contemplate how bad things could get, and as a consequence, about 50% of the time they were just flying blind. They didn't know what to do. How would you compare that with WRC?
Well, look, I think the point around the alternates is important. You know, the training of those alternate staff. I think the core teams, I don't think that would be problematic based on their experience. Some of them were very well experienced, but I think that is potentially, if we were relying on those broader alternates who are named in the plans, that could be a factor if they're not fully familiar. Henry, would you have any other comments on that?
Yeah, probably just wanted to say one of the recommendations we thought would assist quite a lot was the procurement of specialist emergency management tooling, and that would have had benefits for some of those points you mentioned, David.
And also the obviously the exercises, which all of these things rely on people knowing what to do fairly quickly. That's hard to completely scenario based in exercise, but having more complex organizational wide exercises should help in that regard as well.
The experience in Hawke's Bay, where they lost the internet for 6 days, I think it was, and then we've seen recently in Australia, Optus had a major failure that just brought the net to a standstill. Has council got adequate contingency plans for those sort of events?
Not sure I've got that detail with me, Graham, but we could follow that up.
Yeah, I'd just like to know, unless you can answer that, Janine.
I've got Tracy in the background pointing to the sky in terms of access to satellites. I think it is one of the pieces of work that John Crane has talked about, I think, with this committee in terms of some of that communication network security and certainty through this type of event, which is looking at all those different communication methods and channels, both, I guess, communication, but data connectivity, as well, our own data, being able to get flood warning networks with the information getting to the right places. So that has been a key area of reflection for us with a cross-organisational team put in place at the initiation of John to actually look at that issue specifically. Tracy, is there anything you wanted to add from a...
Yeah, Warren just asked me if I was pointing at satellites or God. I said both. The reason I was gesticulating furiously to Janine is that our environmental monitoring manager, Ed Brown, had just prepared for me, received last week, a report on the resilience of our WRC flood warning network. So it is managed through our environmental monitoring team on behalf of and for our ICM team. There are some we took the key findings from the Hawke's Bay and understood how we would be positioned to respond. The investigation into using satellite telemetry is well advanced, I guess, because that is our main area of exposure in terms of that. We do have a second backup system, and we have built in the last 5 years in the team some smarts into the modelling of the data that's sending us so that we can check the aberrations. That is one thing that wasn't apparent during Hawke's Bay, where we were able to the data wasn't coming in and understanding why it wasn't all that data was coming in that looked askew. So I was just about to forward this report actually to Scott, and more than happy to bring a paper back to this committee.
I think that
What-
would be useful.
One other thing to reflect on, and this was after obviously that our review was concluded, and we haven't reviewed it, is what spending has been tagged in the long-term plan going forward in our other investments, and just ensuring that there is appropriate support for these types of activities. Can't comment on what state they're in, but it would be something to be thinking about as councillors in that long-term plan process.
So if we have a major event where we do lose contact with assets, do we have the ability to operate them manually, to drive to them and make observations and use RTs and turn pumps on and do what we need to do?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do. However, there are issues of health and safety. Obviously, in the main event, that's when health and safety is at its most pronounced. But we do, and we have, and our monitoring and telemetry teams work very closely with our catchment management teams on the ground as well.
Okay, if there are no further questions, can I have a mover and seconder for the, excuse me, resolution? Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Paul. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much.
Sorry, just in the last discussion, I asked lots of questions, didn't say anything. It is a very logical internal audit plan. I was just interested in their political input, but it's very logical, very well thought out. I'm very comfortable with it.
Right, thanks, Paul.
Thanks, David.
All right, thank you very much.
Good.
Have a
Thank
Merry
you.
Christmas.
You too. Excuse me. We now move to, excuse me. Item 13, key projects activity update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've got Julie hopefully back online with us now in terms of the shovel ready update.
Kia ora, good morning, and sorry about the technical glitch there earlier. I'm going to leave my camera off. Teams didn't like that today. So yes, just speaking to the status report for the shovel ready program for November, you'll see that the program is green again this month. So we're on track for time, budget, quality and scope across the program. The issues that we were having initially with the in-full financial reporting have largely been resolved, and so we'll have prepared financial reports for December. I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Questions? None?
Good, thank you.
Good.
The other report that is provided in here is around the freshwater policy, but Tracy's given an update on that.
Yeah, I assumed we didn't
so-
need to go over that again. That's still in other people's hands. Pamela.
I did have one question just on the Lake Kamahia. If, I don't know if
Yes.
you're able to just any commentary on the statement around some risk around cultural deliverables being completed? What, can you give me a idea what that's referring to?
Yes, and through you, Mr. Chair, we were under some time pressure to deliver on the PO that was being built, the signage and the cultural health monitoring framework. We are going to meet the PO and signage deliverables, and there's still some risk around the cultural health framework, but it's still being worked on. So that project closes out at Christmas. So it's on track to be largely meeting all its deliverables.
Great, thanks for that.
And in fact, the other couple of projects that are sitting there with ambers against them, pretty much on track as well. Some of those, the issues around bits and pieces have been resolved since the preparation of the report.
Can I just really compliment the staff? I know that this the Shovel Ready program was extensive. There was a lot involved. There was a lot of money. There was a lot of accountability. There was a lot of reporting. There were a lot of variables when you consider weather implications on delivery of projects. I just want to commend the staff on the way they have collectively drawn together to deliver this on behalf of the Waikato region. Kia ora.
Kia ora, and thank you. I'll pass that on to the team.
Warren.
Robbie was actually.
Oh,
sorry,
no,
sorry, Chair.
you go first.
Yeah, Julie, I noticed number 18, I think it is, just around the budgets and that, and we can't get the figures out of our system. And you do note that that will come back to the committee. Do we have a time frame for that?
So we have been able to prepare reports for December. So we've been working closely with finance just to interrogate the information that was coming out of Infor, and have been able to prepare those reports. So while I don't have that to share for today's meeting, the program is on track in terms of where we would expect it to be. We've expended about 33 million to the end of October. It's a $60 million program overall. We've got substantive construction happening this summer, so a lot of expenditure coming through in the coming months. And yeah, that's looking on track.
I get part of the question was, when will we see it though?
So the financial reports will come to the next risk and assurance meeting, or potentially the key project group might meet before then. I'm not sure on that timing, Janine.
Yeah, so we probably won't have another meeting of this group, obviously, until next year. Is there something that we can circulate via email to committee members based on the reporting that you have been able to prepare, just as an interim touch point, I guess, to provide?
Yes, really happy to do that.
Great. Happy if that comes through me, Julie, and I can circulate it to the committee. That'll be great.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Robbie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Julie, my questions are on the foreshore project, and there has been some major concerns from landowners that the material that we're going to put on the bank this year is going to be too wet to do that construction with, and that we're not going to get it to dry because we had one wet summer and it hasn't actually dried out all that much still yet. So there is real concerns with the landowners down there at the foreshore that that project may not proceed, or they don't believe it should, with the material not being dry enough, that you're not going to meet the objectives of that project. And the other one was the rail trail of what that's costing us with legal and issues, because I understood that when we allowed that rail trail to be put on our asset, that there wasn't going to be a cost to us for removing it and putting it back in place. But we're now in a legal discussion with Hauraki who's going to be paying for that. So that's another cost. Thank you. Could you explain some information about those two things, please?
Yes, so through you, Mr. Chair, the on the drying of the material, yes, there is some risk there, and the team are right at this moment working through exactly what that looks like and whether any alternative measures are needed. As we go into the summer, as you say, the material's particularly wet because of the prolonged wet weather we've had this year. That leads into your next comment around the rail trail, and the issue that has arisen there is that because this project was supposed to be completed last summer, and that was derailed by the cyclone. That's meant that the Hauraki Rail Trail is going to be closed again for a time this summer. So Hauraki District Council have expressed strong concern around that. And yes, there has been some correspondence and conversations happening between the two councils on that matter. Basically the cost of costs associated with that, Hauraki District are covering the alternative or workaround, which is to provide a goats track alongside the stop bank that can be accessed by bikers. The cost that is sitting, that cost is sitting with them. The health and safety aspect of it, they're putting with us. We're negotiating the outcome of where those costs will fall. So it's a work in progress at the moment, and we're working hard to get that resolved, obviously before the Christmas holiday season.
Thank you, Julie. But are we going to actually have to look at importing dry material in to complete that stock bank job, or when's that decision going to be made?
That decision will be imminent, but I'm sorry, I haven't seen. The team are working on the options and time and cost implications, and I haven't seen that yet. Happy to connect with you directly on that once I have that information.
Thank you.
Right. If there are no further questions, can we have a mover and seconder for the resolution to receive this report, please? Thank you, Pamela. Thank you, Paul. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. I'm now proposing that we're running ahead of time, but I'm proposing we take a 10-minute break and then come back and work through the rest of the agenda, if that's okay. Thank you.